Imagine a child, no older than 6, standing at the edge of a crowded playground. Around them, laughter echoes. Children chase one another in bursts of joy. But this little one stands frozen, shoulders hunched, eyes darting between groups of friends who seem to belong effortlessly. They want to run, to play, to be seen, but something inside holds them back. A quiet voice, barely audible even to themselves, whispers, "You don't belong here." That voice is not theirs. It was given to them. It came from somewhere else, from an unspoken glance, a missed embrace, a moment when their cry for comfort went unheard. And yet decades later, that same voice will echo in their mind as they hesitate before speaking in meetings, avoid deep connections, or sabotage relationships they desperately crave. This is not an isolated tragedy. This is the hidden architecture of human suffering. You have lived it whether you know it or not. Somewhere within you lies a wound, carved long before language could name it, before logic could make sense of it. Perhaps it was the way your mother always smiled never quite reached her eyes when she looked at you, or how your father's approval always felt like a performance you had to earn. Maybe it was silence where there should have been reassurance, absence where there should have been presence. These wounds do not announce themselves with blood and scars. They live in the spaces between words, in the things that were never said. And yet, we are taught to dismiss them. We are told to move on, to stop dwelling on the past, to grow up and leave childhood behind. But what if the pain of early life does not fade? What if it shapes us more profoundly than we dare admit? What if every addiction, every self-sabotage, every unconscious pattern of fear and longing can be traced back to those invisible injuries? Consider this. The adult you are today, the way you love, the way you work, the way you see yourself, is not solely the product of your choices, but of wounds buried so deeply that you may not even recognize them as wounds. Here is the paradox. Society glorifies independence, resilience, and emotional detachment. Yet our deepest struggles stem from the very thing we were never allowed to have: true emotional connection in childhood. We are expected to become self-reliant individuals, yet we are shaped by forces far beyond our control. We build careers, relationships, identities, all while carrying unseen burdens that dictate our fears, desires, and failures. And the most unsettling truth of all? Most of us never question it. We accept our patterns as fate, our pain as personality, our suffering as normal. So ask yourself, who would you be without these wounds? If you could strip away the layers of conditioning, the inherited traumas, the silent scripts written in your earliest years, who would remain? Would you recognize yourself? Or would you finally meet the person you were meant to be? Had the world not shaped you into someone else first? To understand why these wounds persist, we must first confront the illusion of separateness. From birth, we are thrust into a world that demands conformity, where survival depends not only on physical nourishment, but on emotional adaptation. In his groundbreaking work, psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott introduced the concept of the false self, a defensive mechanism developed when a child learns that authenticity is unsafe. When a parent cannot fully attune to a child's emotional needs, the child begins to mold itself around expectations, suppressing true feelings to secure love and acceptance. This false self becomes a lifelong companion, shaping identity, distorting relationships, and fueling inner conflict. But this phenomenon is not merely psychological, it is philosophical. Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." How many of us live forward while being shackled by the backward weight of childhood wounds? The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, too, grappled with the idea that existence precedes essence, that we are not born with a fixed nature, but must create ourselves through choices. Yet he overlooked a crucial truth. Those early choices are not truly ours. They are imposed upon us by caregivers whose own wounds shape the environment in which we grow. If a child is conditioned to believe that vulnerability is weakness, that emotions must be suppressed, that love must be earned rather than given freely, then their essence is built upon a foundation of falsehoods. The psychologist Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the repressed aspects of the psyche that we deny or suppress. He believed that until we integrate these hidden parts, we remain fragmented beings, projecting our unresolved pain onto the world. Childhood trauma, particularly emotional neglect or inconsistent caregiving, buries entire dimensions of the self beneath layers of defense mechanisms. Some wear perfectionism as armor, others numb themselves with distractions, while many fall into cycles of seeking validation in ways that perpetuate their original wounds. The irony is that these coping strategies, designed to protect us in childhood, become prisons in adulthood. Consider the cultural narratives that reinforce this cycle. Western individualism venerates self-reliance, often misinterpreted as emotional isolation. From an early age, children are discouraged from expressing distress, labeled as too sensitive or needy. The phrase "big boys dawn to cry" is not just about gender roles. It is a declaration that emotional expression is dangerous. Meanwhile, capitalism thrives on disconnection. As philosopher Byung-Chul Han argues in The Burnout Society, modern existence is defined by relentless self-optimization, where productivity replaces well-being. We internalize the message that we must constantly prove our worth, reinforcing the belief that we are only valuable when performing, not when simply being. These forces converge to create a paradox. We yearn for intimacy, yet fear closeness. We desire freedom, yet cling to familiar suffering. We seek healing, yet resist change. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke captured this tension when he wrote, "We are made of forgetting. We forget the origins of our pain, yet its echoes shape our every decision. We forget that the part of us that craves approval was once a child desperate for safety. We forget that the part of us that pushes people away was once rejected. And so we repeat the patterns, mistaking them for choice, believing we are flawed rather than wounded. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of this hidden problem is how it masks itself as normalcy. Trauma, especially relational trauma, does not always arrive as a single catastrophic event. It is often woven into the fabric of everyday interactions. A mother too preoccupied to notice her child's sadness, a father whose love feels conditional, a sibling rivalry that teaches competition over connection. These moments accumulate, forming the scaffolding of the psyche. And because they are ordinary, they are easily dismissed. Everyone goes through hard times, we tell ourselves. I had a good childhood, all things considered. But the body remembers what the mind forgets. The nervous system carries the imprint of early experiences, shaping our responses long after the original threats have vanished. What does it mean to live a life dictated by forgotten wounds? It means feeling inexplicable anxiety in moments of success, sabotaging happiness when it feels too close, or finding comfort in chaos because it mirrors the only version of love we ever knew. It means chasing external validation to fill a void that originated in childhood rejection. It means waking up one day and realizing that much of who you thought you were was built on survival instincts, not authentic selfhood. The question now becomes unavoidable. If these wounds shape our reality so profoundly, how can we begin to heal them? Can we reclaim the parts of ourselves that were lost? Or are we forever bound to the ghosts of our past? The consequences of childhood wounds are not abstract. They manifest in the very fabric of daily life, shaping thoughts, behaviors, and relationships in ways both subtle and profound. At the core of this hidden machinery is the brain's survival instinct, a biological safeguard that evolved to protect us in moments of danger. But when trauma occurs in early development, the brain adapts in ways that persist long after the threat has passed. Neuroscientist Bessel van der Kolk explains that trauma is not stored as a narrative memory, but as sensory imprints, fragments of emotion, bodily sensations, and visceral reactions. This means that when an adult experiences stress, rejection, or conflict, they may not be reacting to the present moment at all, but to a ghost from the past. A raised voice triggers a childhood fear of abandonment. A missed opportunity reignites the shame of parental disappointment. An act of kindness feels foreign, even suspicious, because it contradicts a lifetime of learned mistrust. Cognitive biases further entrench these patterns. Confirmation bias leads individuals to interpret new experiences through the lens of old wounds, reinforcing the belief that they are unworthy, unlovable, or unsafe. The negativity bias ensures that painful memories outweigh positive ones, making it easier to recall criticism than praise, rejection over acceptance. And perhaps most insidiously, The illusion of control convinces people that their suffering is deserved, that their pain is a result of personal failure rather than systemic conditioning. This distortion creates a feedback loop. The deeper the wound, the more rigid the defenses and the less room there is for growth. On a societal level, these unseen forces ripple outward, shaping culture, institutions, and collective behavior. Historically, societies have responded to trauma by enforcing strict hierarchies and punitive systems, structures that mirror the very dynamics that cause harm in the first place. Children raised in environments where power is wielded unpredictably often grow into adults who either seek control at any cost or submit to authority without question. The prison industrial complex, corporate cultures that demand blind loyalty, and political movements built on fear and division all reflect this unhealed trauma. As philosopher Michel Foucault argued, power operates not through overt force, but through internalized discipline. Those who suffered emotional neglect learned to police themselves, to regulate their emotions, to shrink their needs, to perform compliance, all in service of surviving a world that never felt safe. Even the pursuit of happiness becomes distorted. Consumer culture capitalizes on the human need for belonging, offering temporary relief through material possessions, status, and social validation. But these solutions are hollow because they do not address the root wound. Addiction, whether to substances, technology, or relationships, is often an unconscious attempt to soothe unmet childhood needs. Psychologist Gabor Maté observed that all addictions stem from a desire to escape pain, to fill a void that originated in early emotional deprivation. Whether it is compulsive shopping, chronic overworking, or endless scrolling, these behaviors are not signs of moral failure. They are survival strategies. The brain, wired for reward-seeking behavior, turns to whatever provides the illusion of comfort, even if it brings long-term destruction. Most disturbingly, this cycle perpetuates across generations. Unresolved trauma is passed down, not through genetics alone, but through behavior, tone of voice, emotional availability, or lack thereof. Parents who were never taught to regulate their own emotions struggle to attune to their children's needs. The child who was shamed for crying grows into a parent who silences their own child's distress. The boy who was told to suppress his tears becomes a man who cannot tolerate vulnerability in others. This intergenerational transmission of pain is not intentional, but it is real. It is the reason why patterns repeat, why families carry invisible legacies of dysfunction, and why entire communities suffer under the weight of unacknowledged suffering. Yet despite the pervasiveness of this issue, it remains largely ignored. Mental health awareness campaigns focus on symptoms, depression, anxiety, burnout, but rarely address the foundational causes. Therapy, when accessible, often treats surface-level behaviors rather than the deep-seated wounds that drive them. Society encourages resilience, grit, and perseverance, but rarely questions why so many feel broken in the first place. The result is a world full of people who appear functional on the outside but are quietly unraveling within. They go to work, raise families, engage in social media, and fulfill societal expectations, all while carrying an unbearable weight they cannot name. This is the trap, a system that rewards adaptation while punishing authenticity. It is a world that tells people to heal, but offers no real path toward wholeness. It is a culture that celebrates independence, yet breeds isolation. And it is a civilization that claims to value progress, yet remains blind to the wounds that hold it back. Now comes the inevitable question. If these patterns are so deeply ingrained, how can they ever be undone? Is it possible to break free from the chains of the past? Or are we doomed to relive the same cycles generation after generation? The answer lies not in denial, nor in resignation, but in a radical shift in understanding. The key to liberation does not lie in escaping the past, but in seeing it clearly. Healing is not about erasing wounds. It is about reclaiming agency over the stories we have internalized. To break free from the grip of childhood conditioning, one must first confront the uncomfortable truth. The patterns that once protected you are now imprisoning you. The very behaviors that ensured survival in an unsafe environment have become obstacles to living authentically. This realization is not easy. It demands courage, honesty, and a willingness to face the parts of yourself that have long been buried. But once seen, these patterns lose their power. Awareness is the first step toward transformation. Consider the case of Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. His experience in Nazi concentration camps revealed a fundamental truth. Even in the most dehumanizing conditions, individuals retain the ability to choose their response. While he could not control his circumstances, he could choose meaning over despair. This insight is crucial. Trauma does not define us unless we allow it to. The past cannot be changed, but our relationship to it can. Every time you catch yourself reacting out of fear, shame, or self-doubt, pause and ask, whose voice am I hearing right now? Is this mine or is it the echo of an old wound? Why? When you begin to distinguish between who you are and what was imposed upon you, space opens for healing. Another counterintuitive truth is that healing is not about fixing yourself. It is about remembering yourself. Many believe that therapy or self-help is about becoming someone new, improving flaws, eliminating weaknesses. But true healing is about uncovering the self that was always there, beneath the layers of adaptation and survival. Philosopher Martin Heidegger spoke of authenticity, the state of existing in alignment with one's true nature, rather than conforming to external expectations. To achieve this, one must cultivate self-compassion. Instead of berating yourself for repeating harmful patterns, approach them with curiosity. Ask, what was I trying to protect myself from? Treat yourself with the same tenderness you would offer a wounded child. A powerful tool in this process is somatic awareness. Traditional talk therapy focuses on the mind, but trauma lives in the body. Neuroscientist Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory explains how the autonomic nervous system regulates states of safety, fight or flight, and shutdown. When a person experiences chronic stress or trauma in childhood, their nervous system becomes dysregulated, leading to hypervigilance, anxiety, or dissociation. To heal, one must reconnect with the body. Practices such as breathwork, yoga, dance, or mindfulness meditation help restore nervous system regulation by bringing attention to bodily sensations. When you learn to recognize the physical signs of distress, tightness in the chest, shallow breathing, clenched fists, you gain the ability to interrupt automatic reactions. You begin to respond rather than react. Equally vital is the cultivation of healthy relationships. Much of our emotional injury stems from relational wounds, and thus, healing must occur within the context of connection. Psychologist Sue Johnson's emotionally focused therapy, EFT, emphasizes the importance of secure attachment in adult relationships. Contrary to popular belief, dependency is not weakness. It is a fundamental human need. Healthy relationships provide a safe space to express vulnerability, receive empathy, and repair ruptures. But this requires a shift in mindset. Instead of viewing relationships as transactions, where love must be earned through performance, begin to see them as mutual healing journeys. Seek relationships that honor your truth, challenge your defenses, and encourage growth. One of the most radical acts of self-liberation is setting boundaries. For those raised in environments where their needs were ignored, asserting limits can feel terrifying. Boundaries are not walls. They are bridges that allow for genuine connection. Saying no, expressing discomfort, or walking away from toxic situations is not selfish. It is an affirmation of self-worth. Often, the fear of setting boundaries stems from childhood conditioning. If I speak my truth, I will be abandoned. But the opposite is true. When you honor your needs, you attract people who respect them. Finally, healing requires a redefinition of strength. Society equates strength with stoicism, endurance, and emotional suppression. But true strength lies in vulnerability, in the willingness to feel deeply, to sit with discomfort, to embrace imperfection. Author Brené Brown's research on vulnerability reveals that those who live wholeheartedly are not immune to pain. They are simply willing to experience it fully. They do not numb their emotions, nor do they hide behind facades. They allow themselves to be seen, flaws and all. This kind of courage is rare, but it is the foundation of a liberated life. Breaking free from childhood wounds is not a linear journey. There will be setbacks, moments of doubt, and days when the past feels inescapable. But each step forward weakens the grip of old patterns. With every conscious choice, to breathe instead of shut down, to speak instead of silence, to stay present instead of flee, you reclaim a piece of yourself. And in doing so, you begin to live not as a product of your wounds, but as an author of your own story. At the heart of all healing lies a singular, undeniable truth. You were never broken. The wounds you carried, the patterns you repeated, the fears that gripped you, they were not proof of your inadequacy, but evidence of your survival. You did what you had to do to endure. You adapted, you endured, you survived. And in that survival, you became someone remarkable, a person who, against all odds, kept going. But now, as you stand at the precipice of self-awareness, you must ask yourself, who am I when I am no longer running from the past? This is the final revelation. So simple yet so devastatingly profound. Your wounds were never yours to carry. They were inherited, imposed, absorbed like air in a house filled with smoke. You learned to breathe through the haze, mistaking suffocation for normalcy. You believed that pain was a necessary condition of love, that silence was safer than truth, that your worth depended on how much you could give up of yourself. But none of it was ever true, none of it was ever fair, and none of it was ever your fault. Imagine for a moment returning to that child at the edge of the playground, the one who stood frozen, unsure of where they belonged. Imagine kneeling beside them, looking into their eyes and saying, "You are safe now. You are loved exactly as you are. You do not have to change to be worthy of connection." That child is still within you, waiting for those words, waiting to be seen, not corrected, waiting to be held, not fixed, waiting for permission to exist without apology. This is the revolution, not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in the quiet act of turning inward and saying, "I am enough," not because of what you've achieved, not because of what you've endured, but simply because you are here, because you have felt everything that needed to be felt, because you have carried the weight of generations, and still, you rise. Healing is not a destination, it is a return, a homecoming, a reclamation of the self that was buried beneath years of conditioning, fear, and expectation. And the most astonishing part of this journey is that the moment you begin to see yourself clearly, the world begins to shift with you. The people who once triggered your pain no longer hold the same power. The habits that once trapped you begin to loosen their grip. The future, once clouded by the shadows of the past, starts to come into focus. But this realization demands something of you, a reckoning. You can no longer pretend that your pain was meaningless. You can no longer excuse the systems that perpetuate suffering. You can no longer look away from the truth that has been staring at you all along. You were never supposed to survive alone. You were meant to be seen, held, loved, supported, nurtured. You were meant to belong, not in spite of your wounds, but because of them. Because they are proof that you lived, that you fought, that you refused to be erased. So now, the question is no longer how to heal, but why you have resisted it for so long. What would happen if you stopped pushing yourself harder and started holding yourself with gentleness? What would unfold if you let go of the belief that suffering is a prerequisite for growth? What if the greatest act of rebellion in this world is not defiance, but self-compassion? The answer is already within you. It has always been. All you must do is listen. And when you do, you will hear something extraordinary. A whisper that was drowned out by years of noise. A voice that says, "You are not alone. You never were." Let that truth settle into your bones. Let it rewrite your story. Let it guide you forward, not as someone searching for healing, but as someone who has already found it. Now take a breath, stand tall, and walk into the next chapter of your life, not as the wounded child who once stood at the edge of the playground, but as the adult who chooses every single day to return home to themselves.